My name is Evelina Hawthorne, and I am 32 years old. If you had stepped into my townhouse that Sunday morning, you might have thought my life was peaceful. Warm sunlight spilling through Victorian windows, cinnamon sugar in the air, the quiet rhythm of a life built through discipline and sacrifice. A life I thought was finally my own. But peace is fragile, and mine was about to snap. I stood at the stove in the kitchen of my Georgetown townhouse. My townhouse, flipping slices of cinnamon French toast the way my grandmother had taught me. The soft scrape of the spatula, the scent of vanilla, the hum of the old fridge, little anchors that made me feel grounded. Safe. Then I heard my mother's voice. Evelina, sweetheart, could you come in here for a moment? We need to have a family discussion. A cold ripple moved through me. Family discussions on Sunday mornings? Never good, never harmless. I wiped my hands on my apron and headed toward the living room, feeling the first veil of dread slipping over me. Something felt wrong, not loud, not obvious, but like a thin crack forming under the floorboards. The moment I stepped into the living room, the air thickened. My parents, Dominic and Pamela Hawthorne, sat rigidly on the leather sofa, dressed too neatly for a casual morning. My older sister, Brittany, perched on the armchair like royalty, one hand resting dramatically on her pregnant belly. Her husband, Kevin, stood behind her, gripping her shoulders like he owned both her and the moment. My younger brother, Connor, leaned against the fireplace mantel, eyes glued to his phone. That alone told me he wanted to mentally check out before anything even started. I cleared my throat. What's going on? I have errands later, so if we could... My father straightened, that authoritarian pre-announcement posture I'd learned to fear as a child. Evelina, your mother and I have made an important decision about the future of this family. Warning bells exploded in my head. Okay, I said slowly. What decision? My mother reached over and squeezed Brittany's hand, beaming as if announcing a pregnancy reveal on national television. Since Brittany and Kevin are expecting their third child, and their current home is far too small, we've decided they should have this house. Silence. Not quiet, not shock. Silence like the world had exhaled everything and left me standing in the vacuum. My mind stuttered. I'm sorry, what? My father nodded, as though this were the most rational conclusion humankind had ever reached. You're single, Evelina. No children, no prospects. You don't need 4 bedrooms? Brittany's family does. My fingers tightened around my coffee mug. Heat seeped into my palm, grounding me before the rising fury could send me spiraling. This is my house. Grandma and Grandpa left it to me. It's in their will. Brittany leaned forward, and something triumphant flickered in her eyes. Actually, she said lightly, they left it to the family, with the understanding that Mom and Dad would decide who deserves it. And let's be honest, Eve, you're not settling down anytime soon. This house should be full of laughter. Children, a real family. Every word was a dart, aimed with decades of practiced precision. I forced my voice steady. That's not what the will says. I have the original documents upstairs. It clearly names me. My mother sighed dramatically, tilting her head like I was an unruly child. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We've already spoken to our attorney. The transfer will be finalized next month. Kevin stepped forward, businesslike arrogance rolling off him. We're giving you 90 days to move out. That should be enough time to find a place downtown. Downtown, a condo box with fluorescent lighting, because apparently a woman without children didn't deserve roots or legacy. The room spun for a moment. Then everything sharpened. Faces, voices, the betrayal I somehow never saw forming. My father's stone-cold expression, my mother's martyrdom, Brittany's victory, Kevin's entitlement, Connor's guilt-ridden avoidance. It hit me then. They had planned this, quietly, strategically, choosing a moment when they thought I'd be too stunned to fight back. I lifted my chin. Let me confirm, I said. You're trying to take my house, the house I legally own, the house I've paid the mortgage on for 6 years, and give it to Brittany because she's pregnant again? She's building a legacy, my father replied. That's what your grandparents would have wanted. Then why, I asked, calm slicing through the air, did they leave it to me? Brittany's smile wavered, but didn't fall. You were always Grandma's favorite. It wasn't fair. This balances things. Connor muttered, this is messed up. Connor, stay out of this, my mother snapped. Something inside me cracked, not loudly but cleanly, like glass under pressure. I set my mug down with deliberate care. Then I spoke the words that would change everything. You all have 24 hours to get out of my house. The silence that followed was electric, charged, suspended, and waiting to explode. My mother barked out a laugh. You can't be serious. I met her gaze. I have never been more serious in my life. This is my house. I have the deed. I have the will. I have every mortgage receipt. You have 24 hours. My father's face flushed crimson. How dare you speak to us like that? No, I said quietly but firmly. How dare you? You've lived here rent-free for 6 years. You've taken the master bedroom that was meant to be mine. You've taken everything you wanted, but not this, not anymore. Brittany shot up from her seat. You can't kick them out. Where are they supposed to go? Not my problem, I said coldly. Maybe you can fit them into your house, the one you currently own. The gasp in the room was sharp and satisfying. Evelina, my mother tried. No, you tried to steal my home. For once, I'm choosing myself. And with that, I walked away, heart pounding, hands trembling, but spine finally, blessedly straight. They wanted a legacy? They had just ignited mine. The moment I shut my office door behind me, my legs finally gave out. I slid into my chair, my fingers trembling so violently I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. My heartbeat was a hammer inside my rib cage, steady, merciless, accusing. How long had they planned this? How long had they whispered behind closed doors while eating meals I paid for? How long had they looked at me, at my house, with hunger disguised as family concern? I inhaled shakily. They were going to take everything, not because they needed it, but because, for them, needing something and wanting something had always been the same thing. For the first time in my life, that truth wasn't a quiet ache, it was a burning engine. I opened my laptop. There was only one person I could call first. Jade, my cousin, my friend, and most importantly right now, a real estate attorney who had helped Grandma and Grandpa draft their will. She answered on the second ring. Evelina, hey, what's... They're trying to take the house, I whispered. Silence. Then Jade's voice, sharp and lethal. They what? I walked her through everything. The announcement, Brittany's smugness, my parents' claim about family intention, Kevin's attorney nonsense, the 90-day eviction. Jade practically vibrated through the phone. That is illegal, immoral, and so stupid I can't believe your father signed off on it. I helped draft that will, Eve. There is zero ambiguity. The house is yours. Can you come? I asked. I need help and backup. I'll be there in an hour, she said. I'm bringing the will and my briefcase. They want a legal fight? We can give them one. Relief hit me so suddenly my vision blurred. After I hung up, I called the second person I trusted most. Aunt Sharon, my father's older sister, the woman who hugged me a little tighter whenever my parents belittled me growing up. The only adult who ever said privately, "You deserve better than how they treated you." She didn't hesitate. We're driving over, she said. Your uncle's already getting the car keys. Honey, we're not letting them steamroll you. The shaking in my hands eased, just a little. One by one, reinforcements arrived. By noon, my quiet townhouse wasn't quiet anymore. Aunt Sharon and Uncle Leonard walked in, carrying a casserole dish, because, as she said, no battle should be fought on an empty stomach. My cousins Tyler and Naomi arrived minutes later, full of indignation and ready to argue on my behalf, even before hearing the full story. Jade came last, slamming her briefcase on my dining table like she was about to cross-examine God. This is going to be fun, she said grimly. Painful, but fun. For a moment, surrounded by voices and movement, I felt warm, protected. But beneath that warmth, a darker truth pulsed. They would never have done this to Brittany, not once, not even in theory. And now that they'd failed to control my life, they wanted the only thing of mine they believed had value. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. I opened the door to find Connor standing there, hands in his hoodie pockets, guilt written all over him. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside. His eyes scanned the room, Jade's files, the cluster of relatives, Aunt Sharon's expression of barely contained fury. Wow, Connor murmured. You called in the cavalry. What did you expect? I asked. They're trying to steal my house. He winced. Yeah, I know. The guilt in his voice sharpened my attention. For how long? I asked. How long have you known? He swallowed. A month. A cold, sharp ache spread through my chest. They made me promise not to tell you, he continued quickly. Said it was for the good of the family. I told them it was a stupid idea. I told Mom it would blow up, but they don't listen to me. My voice trembled, not with weakness, but with clarity. You should have told me anyway. He nodded miserably. I know, I'm sorry. For a heartbeat, I said nothing. Then I shifted into something steadier. Why are you here now? He took a deep breath. I talked to Great Aunt Dorothy last night. She told me everything Grandpa said about you, how much he trusted you to care for this house, how he wanted it to stay with the grandchild who actually loved it, not the one who demanded it. My throat tightened. She also told me, Connor added, this wasn't the first time Mom and Dad tried to mess with inheritance stuff. Aunt Sharon spun around. They what? Connor shrugged, helplessly. Apparently, when Grandpa died, Dad tried to contest the will because he wanted the Corvette left to Uncle Leonard. Uncle Leonard sighed. Of course he did. My stomach turned over, so this wasn't a sudden betrayal. This was a pattern, a habit, a worldview. Evelina, Connor said softly, they're not going to stop unless someone stops them. He didn't say it outright, but the words hung in the air. And that someone is you. Before I could respond, Naomi peeked out the window. Oh, great, she muttered. They're here. A knot of heat formed in my chest. My parents' car rolled into the driveway. Brittany and Kevin got out. Brittany adjusting her maternity dress like she was preparing for a photo shoot instead of a confrontation. The cavalry was here. But so was the adversary. I straightened, my pulse steadying into something fierce. Everyone, Jade said, snapping open her briefcase. Remember, keep calm, let me handle the legal language, and don't punch anyone no matter how tempting. Tyler groaned. No promises. I exhaled once, slowly, deliberately. The woman who walked toward the living room wasn't the one who had cowered through family conflicts her whole life. She was someone new, someone forged out of betrayal, truth, and the sudden realization that I had allowed myself to be small for too long. As I opened the door to let my parents in, I felt it fully for the first time. This is my house, and I'm done letting them pretend it isn't. My parents walked through the doorway like they owned the place. Their expressions were a mix of irritation and expectation, two people arriving to collect something they believed was already theirs. Behind them, Brittany stepped in delicately, her hand on her lower back, projecting the full theatrical weight of pregnancy. Kevin followed, adjusting his tie like he was about to lead a board meeting rather than justify the attempted theft of my home. They all stopped short when they saw the room. Jade standing at the dining table, documents spread out like evidence in a trial. Aunt Sharon and Uncle Leonard side by side, arms folded, eyes sharp. My cousins bristling with indignation. Connor on the couch, looking like he wished he could sink into the cushions. And me. No apron, no nervous fidgeting, just quiet, deliberate resolve. My mother's eyes narrowed. What is this? Some kind of intervention? Aunt Sharon stepped forward, voice icy. More like a reality check. My father bristled. This is none of your business, Sharon. When you try to steal from my niece, she said, it becomes very much my business. Jade snapped her briefcase open. Dominic, Pamela, we need to talk. The temperature in the room dropped. My parents exchanged glances, the kind they shared anytime someone threatened their carefully curated narrative. Brittany hovered behind them, lower lip trembling like she was the wounded one here. Jade held up a document. I'm Jade Morrison, she said, Evelina's cousin and the real estate attorney who helped draft your parents' will. I've reviewed the original documents and all supporting materials. She tapped the paper. You have no legal claim to this property. My mother blinked. We spoke to our attorney. He said, no, he didn't, Jade interrupted. Either he isn't real or you misunderstood him on purpose, because the language in this will is explicit. The house goes to Evelina Hawthorne with a provision that you two may reside here. There is no transfer clause. There is no family discretion. There is no ambiguity. She turned the will toward them. Would you like me to read the part where your parents describe Evelina as the granddaughter who cherished this home as they did? A muscle in my father's jaw twitched. Kevin stepped forward, his confidence faltering. Well, our attorney mentioned... Your attorney, Jade said, would laugh you out of his office if you brought this to him. Any attempt to challenge this will be considered harassment and fraud. Brittany surged forward, her voice cracking. This isn't fair. I have children. I have a family. What does Evelina have? I felt those words like a stab, but sharper, somehow gentler, was the realization that they didn't hurt the way they used to. Not anymore. What do I have? I asked quietly. A life I built, a career, this home, a sense of responsibility that kept you all afloat for years while you took advantage of me. Brittany's face went white. Connor rubbed a hand over his face. This is really messed up, guys. Stay out of this, my mother snapped. No, he said. I'm done staying out of things. Jade folded her hands neatly on the table. Let's address the next issue, financial contribution. Aunt Sharon crossed her arms. Yes, let's. My mother scoffed. We don't have money, Sharon, you know that. No money? Naomi said slowly, pulling out her phone. Then how did you afford a 2-week Hawaii trip last summer and that new Audi last year? My parents' silence was damning. Connor's eyes widened. Oh my God, you've been saving everything, haven't you? while Evelina paid for every bill in this house? I felt a wave of heat rush through me. It wasn't shock, it was confirmation. How long had I suspected? How long had I ignored the clues because calling it what it was, exploitation, felt too painful? I steadied myself. How much? I asked softly. How much have you saved? My father straightened his spine. That's none of your business. Connor didn't hesitate. Almost $400,000. The room erupted. My breath caught in my throat. 400,000. Saved. While I worked 12-hour days, paid the mortgage, covered every utility, bought groceries, sacrificed vacations, built my future around the belief that they needed me. My mother's voice pitched high, defensive and trembling. We deserve a comfortable retirement. We worked hard our whole lives. On my dime, I shouted. The silence was instant and heavy. You lied, Brittany whispered to them. You said money was tight. You said you couldn't afford daycare. You said... Don't turn this on us, my father barked. We are your parents. We raised you. We cared for you. You did the bare minimum required to avoid child neglect charges, I said coldly. And the second I had something valuable, you decided it belonged to Brittany. My mother's lip trembled. Evelina, sweetheart, don't be cruel. Jade stepped in again, voice crisp. Regardless, you need to vacate this home within 24 hours. My father's face flushed crimson. You think you can kick us out? We're family. Family doesn't steal from each other, Connor said quietly. Not unless they think the person they're stealing from won't fight back. I looked at him sharply. He wasn't defending me out of obligation. He was defending me because, for the first time, he truly saw it. All of it. I turned back to my parents. You have taken from me my entire life, I said. My confidence, my peace, my home, but not today. You leave tomorrow. You can collect your things later, but I'll supervise, and you will take nothing that belongs to Grandma or Grandpa. My mother gasped. How could you think we'd steal from them? Everyone looked at her. We all knew the answer. Tyler muttered under his breath, because you already did. My parents' eyes widened. They knew exactly what he meant, and I saw it, the first flicker of fear in their expressions. Not fear of me, but fear that the truth was catching up to them. My father tried one last time, grasping for control. When you're old and alone, you'll regret this, Evelina. I lifted my chin. I would rather be alone than exploited. The room fell silent. My mother's tears began to fall. Brittany was shaking. Kevin looked like he wanted to vanish. And for the first time in my life, I felt taller than all of them. They walked out of my house without another word. The front door closed behind them like a gavel. I exhaled, trembling, electrified, alive. Jade placed a hand on my shoulder. That, she whispered, was the moment you stopped being the family doormat and became the woman your grandparents always knew you were. I didn't respond. I just looked around the room, the house my grandparents left me, because they believed I would protect it. And I knew I would, no matter what came next. The moment the door closed behind them, the entire house seemed to exhale. Not peacefully, not gently, more like the way a body collapses after holding its breath for too long. I stood there, surrounded by the people who had come to defend me, and suddenly the adrenaline drained out of my limbs in a heavy, disorienting wave. My fight was over, but the war wasn't. Jade approached first, her expression softening now that the confrontation had passed. You did incredibly well, Evelina, she said. You kept your composure. You stayed firm. I've represented clients who fall apart under less pressure. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. I feel like I'm shaking inside. That's normal, she said. Your body's processing the shock and the grief. I blinked. Grief? She nodded. You didn't just confront a legal battle today. You confronted the truth about your family. The truth. That word lingered like a bruise. Because even though I'd stood tall, even though I'd said the words with terrifying clarity, a part of me still wished, naively, stupidly, for a moment of remorse from my parents. Some flicker that they understood what they were doing, or even that they cared. But they hadn't looked at me like a daughter. They had looked at me like a resource. Maybe they always had. Aunt Sharon wrapped an arm around me and pulled me close the way my own mother never had. Oh, honey, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. I know today hurt, but you did the right thing. You protected yourself. Her voice cracked slightly, not pity, but empathy, the kind you only get from someone who has seen similar scars. I leaned into her, allowing myself one brief moment to sag. Then I straightened again. Because there was still so much to do. The war room becomes a healing room. In the hours that followed, my home transformed again, not into a battlefield this time, but into something warm, familiar, comforting. Aunt Sharon made coffee and insisted everyone drink something hot to settle their nervous systems. Uncle Leonard started fixing a loose hinge on my pantry door, declaring, "Keeping your hands busy helps keep your mind steady." Naomi and Tyler sat at my dining table, scrolling silently, occasionally exclaiming, "I still can't believe they tried that." Connor stayed too. He hovered at the edge of the kitchen like a ghost who wasn't sure if he was allowed to exist in this new version of our family dynamic. Finally, he spoke. "Eve, can I help with something?" His voice cracked with guilt. I softened. "Yeah, you can help me by sitting down." He blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." Because what I needed from Connor wasn't labor or loyalty. I needed honesty, presence, the truth he'd been too scared to tell sooner. We stood across from each other, awkward, like two people meeting for the first time instead of siblings who had once shared a bunk bed. "I'm really sorry," he said quietly. "I should have told you a month ago." "You should have," I said gently. "But you're here now. That matters too." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Evelina, I didn't realize how bad it was, how long they've been doing this. I knew they manipulated things, but I didn't know the full pattern until Dorothy told me." Pattern. Another ugly truth. This wasn't just one betrayal. This was the culmination of years of being pushed aside, minimized, used. Yet somehow this moment, this kitchen full of people who chose to be here, felt like my first step into a life built on my own terms. A life without asking for permission. Reclaiming the house. By the next morning, after a restless but determined sleep, I walked downstairs with a new intention. Reclaim my home, not just legally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. My parents' absence left a palpable gap, heavy at first, then unexpectedly liberating. The space they had occupied for 6 years suddenly felt bigger, cleaner, lighter, like something poisonous had evaporated overnight. A locksmith arrived at noon. He replaced the deadbolt, the handle, even the side door locks at Jade's recommendation. "Better safe than sorry," she'd insisted. "They won't break in, but entitlement makes people desperate." When the locksmith handed me the new keys, sleek, cold metal, I felt something powerful shift in my chest. Not triumph, not vengeance. Ownership. "This house is mine," I whispered to myself. It always was. And now it finally felt like it. A home transformed. In the following days, I threw myself into reclaiming everything my parents had quietly taken from me. I cleaned the master bedroom, my bedroom, finally airing out the space I hadn't slept in for years. I dismantled my mother's makeshift office in Grandma's sewing room and restored the shelves with Grandma's neatly folded fabrics. I cleared out the extra storage that Brittany insisted she needed for future baby items, even though she lived in another house entirely. Each small action felt like a stitch repairing a torn seam. But the most important restoration was the kitchen. The heart of my childhood, the place Grandma taught me to cook, the place where love was warm and edible and uncomplicated. I tiled a new backsplash, blue and white, patterned like Grandma's favorite apron. I painted the cabinets a deep forest green. I replaced the dull bulbs with warm lighting that made the space glow at sunset. Every change whispered, "This is who I am, this is my legacy, not theirs." A new connection. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I started noticing something unexpected. Connor kept showing up. Sometimes to help repaint a room, sometimes to bring breakfast, sometimes just to sit in silence while I worked. One evening, after sanding down one of Grandpa's old bookshelves, he sighed. "You know," he said, "it feels weird. Mom and Dad keep saying you're cruel, that you threw them out. But every time they describe it, I realize they're describing themselves." I looked at him, the weight of his words sinking deep. "And I think I've spent most of my life trying not to get on their bad side," he added. "But you actually stood up to them. I don't know how you did it." I paused, then said, "I stopped trying to be the daughter they wanted and started being the woman I needed to become." Connor stared at me for a long moment. "I'm really glad you're my sister," he whispered. I smiled. "I'm glad you're mine too." And for the first time in years, we meant it. As I locked up the house that night, looking at the freshly painted walls and the restored warmth of each room, a strange, quiet certainty settled over me. This wasn't just the aftermath, it was the beginning of who I would be without their shadows. 3 months passed, long enough for the house to regain its soul, yet not long enough for the wounds to fully close. The air felt different now, lighter, cleaner, honest. The rooms breathed without tension. The floors carried only my footsteps. The walls finally echoed with voices that chose to be here, not ones that felt entitled to inhabit them. But healing isn't linear. Sometimes the deepest pain doesn't announce itself with chaos. It creeps quietly, disguised as a phone call. The call came from Aunt Sharon. I answered on the second ring, smiling because her voice usually meant warmth, calm, or a casserole recipe she had rediscovered. Not today. Evelina, she said, her tone tight. We need to talk. Immediately, my stomach contracted. What's wrong? It's about your grandparents' belongings. A pause. Some of them have been appearing at estate sales. Her words evaporated the warmth in the kitchen. All that remained was cold, sharp disbelief. I don't understand. Whose estate sale? Not an estate sale, Sharon sighed. A consignment reseller. Someone recognized Grandma's china pattern. Another piece showed up in an online auction. Pieces of my grandparents, of my childhood, of the only people who ever made me feel wholly, unconditionally accepted. Are you saying, I whispered, that Mom and Dad sold them? Sharon didn't answer immediately. She didn't have to. Yes, she said softly, and we're gathering proof. I sank into a chair, my breath catching in my throat. The reunion I never had flashed across my mind. One where my mother apologized, my father admitted fault, Brittany grew humility, and we all found a way back to each other. That fantasy shattered with a single exhale. I pressed my fingers to my forehead. They were supposed to be heirlooms. They were meant for us, for the next generation. Sharon's voice broke. I know. Not anger this time, grief. She continued, your parents told everyone they were struggling financially after you threw them out. They used that excuse to justify selling anything they could get their hands on. The word struggling echoed with grotesque irony. Struggling with nearly $387,000 hidden in retirement savings. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle like a stone in my chest. This wasn't desperation, I said slowly. It was retaliation. And greed, Sharon added. Don't forget greed. Connor confirms the truth. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Connor. He never called twice in a day unless something was wrong. Hey, I answered. He didn't even say hello. Eve, I need to tell you something before someone else does. Mom and Dad, they've sold more than you think. I inhaled sharply. How much? I don't know yet, but I confronted them this morning. They tried to lie at first, said they only sold a few things for extra cash. But then Mom slipped. A bitter exhale. Turns out they made almost $30,000. 30,000. My grandparents' heirlooms, their history, their love reduced to a dollar amount that didn't even compare to the money my parents were secretly hoarding. Why would they do that? I asked, voice barely audible. Why would they take the last pieces of Grandma and Grandpa? Connor's voice cracked. They said they were entitled to it since they got kicked out and had to start over. My vision blurred. Start over. As if I hadn't been the one forced to rebuild. As if they were the victims of their own decisions. Connor hesitated. Eve, they're not going to stop unless someone stops them. I let out a shaky breath. They already stopped themselves, Connor. They've crossed a line they can't come back from this time. Choosing peace over vengeance. That night, I walked through the house, touching objects my grandparents had left behind. A ceramic bowl Grandma made in her pottery class. Grandpa's old toolbox with the broken latch. A faded quilt that still smelled faintly of lavender and sun. Some were still here, some were gone forever. I thought about legal action. I thought about demanding compensation. I thought about confronting them with the fury that had been building inside me since the day they tried to take my home. But then, I imagined standing in front of them again. I imagined their excuses, their self-pity, their refusal to understand the concept of accountability. I imagined them weaponizing their age, their tears, their narratives of sacrifice, and I felt something unexpected. Exhaustion. They had already stolen enough. My peace, my time, my identity during childhood, my house for 6 years, and now pieces of my grandmother's legacy. What they would not steal was another second of my emotional life. I chose peace. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just peace. A quiet, resolute refusal to let them dictate any more chapters of my story. The first cracks in Brittany's perfect world. The real shock didn't arrive until weeks later. It came in the form of a frantic text from Connor. Eve, you're not going to believe this. Call me ASAP. I did. His voice was breathless, almost stunned. Kevin's company is under audit. Some things came up. His business might collapse. For a moment, I said nothing. Not out of satisfaction, not out of malice. Just quiet recognition. Consequences finally arriving at the doorstep of the golden child. Connor continued. Brittany's blaming you. She says the stress from the family falling apart distracted Kevin and caused this. I let out a soft, hollow laugh. They caused the stress, all of it, every bit. I know, he whispered. I know. I could hear the ache in him, torn between love for a sister and the truth she refused to see. Are Mom and Dad involved? I asked. Yeah, he said bitterly. They're helping Brittany spin the story. They're all pretending you're the villain who ruined their lives. A strange stillness washed through me. I had expected anger. Instead, I felt clarity. If losing access to my home, my money, my stability causes their world to collapse, I whispered, maybe their world was never stable to begin with. Connor didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, with quiet conviction, Eve, you're the only one who walked away with integrity. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. Kevin's business didn't just have issues, it imploded. Within 6 weeks, the audit uncovered enough questionable accounting practices to freeze his accounts, suspend several contracts, and open a formal investigation. The news traveled fast through the family grapevine, faster than truth, faster than logic, faster than Brittany's fragile pride could handle. And just like Connor warned, the blame found its way to the same familiar target, me. Even though I had nothing to do with Kevin's finances, even though their downfall began long before our confrontation, even though the choices they made were their own. But nothing as powerful as delusion needs logic to survive. The phone call. It was 7:45 on a Wednesday night when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Mom. A part of me still flinched. Conditioning runs deep, I answered, bracing myself. My mother didn't waste time. Evelina, your sister is in shambles. Kevin's whole world is falling apart, and she's barely holding herself together. All of this tension in the family, all this unpleasantness, it's taken a toll on them. Unpleasantness. As if trying to steal my house had been a minor disagreement over holiday dinner seating. I said nothing, letting her continue. You could help, she offered, voice dripping with false warmth. You could talk to her, apologize for the stress you've caused. Maybe then she could finally focus on supporting her husband. There it was. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted a pawn they had lost. I didn't cause their stress, I said quietly. Their own choices did. My mother inhaled sharply. That is unbelievably selfish, Evelina. I almost laughed. Selfish. From the woman who sold my grandparents' heirlooms for $30,000 and called it starting over. From the mother who lived in my house for 6 years without paying a cent. From the parent who plotted to give my home to my sister while I was flipping French toast in the kitchen. I steadied my breathing. We can talk when you're ready to acknowledge what you all did, I said. Not before. My mother's voice hardened. We are your family. And family doesn't rob their children, I replied. The silence that followed was a different kind of quiet. Shaken, unfamiliar, fragile. Then she hung up. The attempted reconciliation. The next week, they tried again. My father called this time, his voice stern and falsely composed. Evelina, this coldness has gone on long enough. We are your parents. We expect respect. Respect. They demanded it like rent, something I owed them simply for existing. I closed my eyes. When you're ready to have a real conversation about what you did, I said, you know how to reach me. We were doing what's best for the family, he insisted. No, I said. You were doing what was best for Brittany. And there it was, the unspoken truth finally spoken aloud. My father's silence lasted a full 5 seconds before he muttered, this is a waste of time, and hung up. I didn't hear from them again. Not an apology, not even an acknowledgement of harm. Just silence. And the deeper that silence grew, the more I understood. They had never been trying to reconcile. They were trying to regain access. To me, to my home, to my resources, to the version of myself who used to bend. She didn't exist anymore. Brittany's spiral. As weeks turned into months, news of Brittany's state trickled in through Connor. She's not doing well, he admitted during one of our coffee nights. She's angry all the time. She cries at the slightest thing. She keeps saying her life is falling apart. She believes the house caused it, I said, losing access to it, losing the story she created about what she deserved. Connor nodded. She keeps insisting the house was supposed to be hers, like you stole it from her. I exhaled deeply, a sadness curling in my chest. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, just a soft grief for the truth Brittany refused to accept. She never once asked what I felt, I murmured. Only what she thought she deserved. Connor rubbed the back of his neck. She's not stable right now. Kevin's terrified. Dad is furious at him for messing up the business. Mom is trying to micromanage everything. It's chaos. Because the fantasy collapsed, I said. Not the family. He looked at me, understanding dawning. Yeah, he whispered. The fantasy. The real family. The strange thing was, as my biological family fractured further, my chosen family crystallized. Jade continued stopping by weekly, sometimes with legal advice, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just to sit in companionable silence while we watched old movies Grandma loved. Aunt Sharon and Uncle Leonard invited me to every holiday, every barbecue, every small celebration. Each gathering came with the unspoken reassurance: you are family, real family. Naomi and Tyler made my house their unofficial hangout spot. Game nights, wine nights, random Tuesday evenings where we ate too much pasta and complained about work. And Connor became something I never imagined: my friend, my brother, my equal. He came over often, helped me renovate, helped me garden, helped me laugh again. One quiet afternoon, while we painted the upstairs hallway together, he said, "You know, I feel like I have a sister now. Not just someone who lived next door in the family who never talked about anything." My brush slowed. "Same," I whispered. He smiled, a small, sad, hopeful smile. A new beginning. It was around this time that I met someone. His name was Andrew, a colleague's friend who helped us troubleshoot a software issue at the firm. Kind eyes, steady voice, the kind of man who listened fully, not partially, the kind of man who didn't expect emotional labor as payment for basic respect. He found out what happened to me not because I told him, but because he overheard Jade joking one evening. "Anyone tries to steal your house again, call me. I'll bring the legal flamethrower." When he finally asked about it, I braced myself for pity. But Andrew didn't pity me. He admired me. "You did something incredibly hard," he said one night as we walked through a small park near my home. "A lot of people would have crumbled. You didn't." For once, I let myself believe it. A life rebuilt. Months passed. Kevin's business collapsed completely. Brittany retreated socially. My parents withdrew into their condo, surrounded by the money they'd chosen over me. But I grew. My home flourished. My relationships strengthened. My sense of self sharpened. And for the first time in my life, I felt unshakably anchored. Not by duty, not by guilt, not by blood, but by choice. One evening, as I prepared dinner for Jade, Connor, Andrew, and the rest of my circle, I looked around my renovated kitchen, the space I had reclaimed tile by tile, and felt something I had never felt before. Peace, real peace. The kind that settles, not temporarily, but permanently. The kind you earn, the kind you build, the kind you protect, and the kind nobody would ever take from me again.